Now request is Mr. Saurav Kundu, if he's online, because he's requested we want to go early. So he's the sustainability officer for Tata Steel. So Saurav, if you, it will be good if you express about the views and areas of interest for steel industry in large, and what is happening in that industry space. So that will be good for us to know for this forum. And area where you are
Sure.
looking for these technologies which are really able to absorb CO2 as in a waste and convert into valuable product. So all yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Vilas. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity. So I'll just briefly talk about the steel industry, the challenges that we are facing, and the remedies maybe that we are looking forward to. So the steel industry is known to be in the hard to abate sector because 1 ton of steel production actually emits about 2.5 tons of CO2, so which is quite large in amount. What are the different ways and means of avoiding it? There are two ways of avoiding it. One, that the coal based sources of energy that we use or reductant that we use, which could be either coke or coal, or to some extent other fuels, that needs to be replaced with greener fuels. That means hydrogen bearing fuels, which could be natural gas, could be hydrogen itself, or or sometime even some other hydrogen bearing reductants. The other part is that we have to capture and utilize CO2. So these are the two remedies. But let us quickly discuss what are the problems there. So we all know that the blast furnace is the route through which most of the steel is being produced by the integrated steel plants. But blast furnace route is dependent on the coal and coke. The other alternate route is, of course, DRI, where the gas-based DRI actually offers a much lesser amount of emission, but that requires a large quantity of natural gas. Natural gas availability in India is less. Okay, and particularly in the eastern part of India, where the most of the steel plants are now being built or will be built in the future, there the availability of gas is less. So that is one major challenge that the industry is facing, steel industry is facing right now. The other part, of course, we all heard about hydrogen. Many of you might have heard about the injection trial of hydrogen that Tata Steel has recently done. That was the highest amount of hydrogen being injected in a blast furnace in the whole world. Of course, it has been started by Thyssen, but the quantity of hydrogen injected by Tata Steel is much more. But the point is the availability of hydrogen at cost. So if you go by that analysis, you will see that to this particular process to be viable, economically, the hydrogen cost has to be less than $1.5 a kg. Right now, it is not available in below $5 to $6 a kg. Of course, the hydrogen has to be green, which is another challenge. So the transition of fossil based fuel to hydrogen based fuel will be gradual and it will take time. The other challenge that the steel industry faces is our industry is a growing industry. We all know that Indian government has set up a target of 300 million tons of production by 2030. So even if we reduce the per ton basis the CO2 emission, but what will happen in absolute, the emissions are not going to reduce anytime soon. Gradually, beyond 2030, there might be a decline, but that is going to take time. So as we can see that the CO2 emission will remain. The other option that comes to us is to capture carbon and utilize it, or sequester or go for sequestration. Sequestration is a problem in India because the geography does not support it. So the utilization is one way, but I'll mention the challenges in utilization as well. CO2 is utilized best by making some chemicals. Most of it has to be hydrocarbons. So that means they are also requirement of green hydrogen would be necessary. And that too, in that particular area too, the threshold price of hydrogen has to be below $2 a kg or even lesser than that. If that happens, then the hydrocarbons, making hydrocarbon like methanol is already there. There are work going on SAF and other making of other chemicals. But there is one more challenge, which is almost always we forget to mention. That challenge is related to the fact that the amount of space that will be required to put these additional facilities of CCU. So we have done a very quick calculation, and we have seen that if CCU has to be the way forward for steel industry to reduce the CO2 emission, then for each 1 million ton of production of steel, we have to have additional 100 acres of land to put the CCU facility. Often, our steel industries are not having that flexibility in terms of availability of space. So that is going to be one more challenge that we are going to face in the future. The last point that will be there from my side is the other technology development. For instance, in CCU, we can actually convert CO2 into different carbonates without having hydrogen. So mineralization is one. Although there the technology readiness level is low, we have tried some, but to scale up those technologies becoming a problem. Uh, there are other options. There are other options like converting CO2 into, let us say, styrene carbonate, or for that matter, propylene carbonate and all. We have pilots in Tata Steel on those. The scale up of those is a challenge, but that will happen gradually. And we need to do lot more research in development of catalyst for conversion of CO2 to different chemicals, with or without the help of hydrogen. Hydrogen will be, of course, as I said, necessary, but even for that hydrocarbon conversion or non-hydrocarbon other chemical conversion, the research on this catalyst would be important. One last point is that carbon price in India is still not there, but government is working towards it. There are 13 task forces which have been formed on green steel. Those task forces are working. Many of the steel plants are, representative from steel plants are member there. We need to keep watching that space and develop together the carbon pricing part in India, and try to see that how we can make it utilize more and more such regulatory advantages. Scrap is one more problem for us, because scrap is one way to decarbonize steel industry. Tata Steel is working on addition of scrap in the value chain in different processes, in both BOF processes, as well as the EAF technology for melting scrap and making steel. But the availability of scrap in quantity that you need and the cost that you need is going to be a challenge. So there is a larger collaboration required to make sure the supply, to ensure a good supply chain of scrap, the way the steel industry would need in the future. So these are the few points I had in my mind. I'm ready to discuss any further question or point that you might have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Saurav.